Hello and welcome to On Track GP with myself, Matisse, Sam and Joe. We are here to preview this weekend's Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah. I'm very excited, but before that, we have a lot to talk about and catch up on, don't we guys? Because Bahrain, it's a Red Bull take 1-2 podium finish.
Disgusting.
It saw some issues with Ferrari. It saw more issues with Mercedes as well. And of course, a stellar weekend for the one and only Red Bull. Yeah. Sam, as I just mentioned, Ferrari and Mercedes have still got problems, haven't they? It was very, very clear.
Yeah, definitely. They were so far behind Red Bull, and now there's this sort of race to try and get upgrades ready, and it's sort of, I think Saudi Arabia is just a bit too soon really, with a lot of the teams talking about Baku, which is in 2 races time. But yeah, there's a lot of problems for Ferrari, not to mention, I'm sure we'll come on to it, but Charles Leclerc already has a grid penalty, which is very early in the season, only 2 races in. So yeah, a lot of problems at both Ferrari and Mercedes. Mercedes car just not looking as quick as it should be really from what you expect. So yeah, not a great time for them.
No, not at all. Joe?
What can I add? 10th place grid penalty for Charles Leclerc. Sainz looked well off the pace the other day in Bahrain, so it's worrying signs. I think, not to get too ahead of myself, but I have more confidence this week. It's a better track for the Ferrari car. The corners are quicker. There's 3 places on the Jeddah track where you get over 180 miles an hour, and the Ferrari car is good in a straight line. We've seen that from testing. So I do have a little bit more confidence. It's a better track for the car and for Mercedes, Matisse as well. So I have a little bit more confidence, but Red Bull, man, they just look so good. So good.
Do you feel like it's kind of like the race win is off the table a little bit, or do you have the confidence in, because Leclerc's starting from a treacherous position, but
best 11.
Sainz is still going to be up there. Can he contend, do you think, with the front runners? Or
I'd love that. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see him on pole. The main worry, I think, for everybody else with Red Bull is that this is a street circuit. Sergio Perez was on pole last year in Jeddah. He loves a street circuit. We see him do really well at Monaco, these kind of tracks. So I worry for everybody else that's not a Red Bull fan, to be honest.
Damn.
Good for you.
Yeah, good for you. For once, it's nice to support a team that actually does well. You know?
Yeah.
We are going to talk about Mercedes in a little bit, but let's actually just look at this track. So Jeddah, 27 turns in this track. Fast flowing, quick street circuit, as you mentioned. Narrow walls, barriers, second longest circuit in the calendar as well, just after Spa. It's very high risk for accidents. Last season, Schumacher's accident in qualifying, double red flag and race restart from the crash in 2021. There's a lot that can be exciting though on this track with all of these dangerous things going on, but I guess that's what we like to see.
Yeah, definitely. Like as you mentioned, it's a street circuit, so naturally there's going to be a higher risk to the drivers and the cars. There's been a lot of changes this year because this is a very new race, and a lot of the drivers weren't happy last year, saying it was very unsafe. George Russell in particular was very vocal on that front. So there's been some sort of changes this year to make it a little bit more safe, but that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy ride really. Like Joe mentioned, it's a very quick track, and the walls are ever so close, so like even a minor mistake and you're in the wall, as Schumacher found out last year. So I think that's something that can sort of mix up the standing order. Like a small mistake can have you out the race very early on. So yeah, I think it's an exciting track, and then it's one to look forward to really.
You've got 3 rookies as well. I'm interested to see how they get along in a track like this, because this is, like you said, high accident prone. And I do miss Latifi. I'm gonna say it every time. I miss Latifi for days like this.
Well, I don't think Williams are missing Latifi.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep bringing up Latifi every week because I miss this guy.
Genuinely, I agree.
The Stan account right here.
Yeah, I agree though.
Team Latifi.
You need someone to stick it in the wall to mix it up a bit.
I'm telling you,
the order.
That's what we needed in Bahrain. We didn't get it. I'm fuming.
No, he didn't. But actually, I want to talk about the newbies, because actually they had a fairly okay. I mean, Logan Sargent had a great first race for Williams, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that was a surprise really. Like going into it, you would have said he was the least experienced one and probably the worst car, but he somehow ends up the top among them all. I think there's still more to come from Oscar Piastri. Obviously, he retired fairly early on in Bahrain. We didn't really get a chance to see what he can do. And Nick de Vries also had a good race. Like I think there was a lot of surprise really that AlphaTauri were a bit quicker than some were expecting. But yeah, I think the big thing I'm looking out for is Piastri, and to see how he does really in a full race. I know the other McLaren of Norris also had issues, but you can't imagine that will happen again really.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to actually touch on McLaren. We can do that now as the topic's coming up. what is a realistic expectation for McLaren? Because for me, I know it's very early on, we've only had one race, but to me, it doesn't look like that's a car that's going to be challenging to that upper midfield echelon.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Obviously, their stated goal is P4, but I think there's a lot of strong candidates for P4 at the moment. I think that car's just got a lot of problems, really. That they just keep talking about the downforce, which is something that's very important to an F1 car. But you've got to remember the season's still early. Like, they do have this time to sort of develop and make it a bit better. But it's just whether they can do that at a pace to keep up with everyone else, because it's not like everyone else is standing still. Like, the McLaren car's got to almost do more than everyone else to get back to where they were. I think as well as the speed, you've got to get reliability sorted. So obviously they had one driver who retired 2 weeks ago now, but the other driver, I think he pitted 6 times with an issue, like that he was essentially just doing like a testing run. So I think there are a lot of issues, like both reliability and performance, but I think maybe Saudi Arabia is probably a bit too soon to get that sorted, but I think they're lucky in a way that after the Australian Grand Prix, we've got this little bit of a break, so maybe they can sort them out before Baku.
Yeah, interesting. Should we talk Mercedes?
We can.
I mean, we know it was a very poor weekend in Bahrain.
Yeah.
They finished 5th and 7th, respectively. And Toto Wolff, I mean, he's been so critical of that car.
Yeah.
There's a potential that they're going to do away with the side pod as well. But then if they do away with the side pod, that's what their development's been all put into, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they've gone with their own kind of methodology, isn't it? They want to stand out. They want to be their own team. They don't want to copy anyone. They definitely don't want to copy Red Bull. I think that'd be a slap in the face to their own. Their little bit of pride would be hurting.
Christian Horner will be right there.
Yeah, exactly, of course. And we've seen the rivalry between those two already. And I heard rumours about Aston Martin potentially leapfrogging them with the engine that they've got. If they don't start picking up results, they're going to start favouring Aston Martin at the factory. I don't know if that's true. It
is technically another Red Bull.
It's the rumours that I've heard, and I'm like, damn. I mean, that's the last thing we need at Mercedes, is to now not even be the favoured team.
Yeah.
So I think with Mercedes, the key is consistency again this year from George and from Hamilton, and to kind of not let the wheels fall off, literally. Because last year we saw they had issues with the porpoising, and then Hamilton, I feel like he wants that 8th so badly. We've been talking on the channel about him, where he might end up at the end of the season. As the upgrades just need to come in as soon as possible, because time is ticking, and we can't really afford to go much longer without being up at the top, especially with Aston Martin coming. We could easily drop to the 4th fastest team. I'm hoping that this track, like you said, is more favourable for Mercedes, but the proof needs to be in the pudding for that team right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. But there are going to be radical changes, apparently, to the car, to the chassis in the coming weeks. Technical Director James Allison is now getting involved in that project. There's also been some rumours, some chatter, that Lewis Hamilton, he could potentially look for a future with someone like Ferrari, someone like Aston Martin. Do you think that is plausible?
No, possibly not, to be blunt. But yeah, I think if he's not racing for Mercedes, I think he retires. I think from a Ferrari point of view, like, is there much worth doing that? Obviously, Hamilton's a very good driver, but he comes with a huge salary expectation. Also, he's not a driver for the future, really. I think he's 37 odd or that kind of age. Like, it'd be silly to get rid of. You'd presume they get rid of Sainz to fill him in, but that'd be a sort of, you shooting yourself in the foot, really. So yeah, I think Mercedes do have big issues that I think they will go to this, or they just scrapped this 0 side pod plan that they had, really. Like, they had such faith that this had performance in it, but as soon as you saw it from Bahrain, it just didn't. So
hasn't had any.
Just there's already been rumours that they had a B spec car like in the works. So again, as I said with McLaren, I think it might be a bit too soon to see that at Saudi, but that's something I expect by Baku. You'll see potentially a whole different car from Mercedes.
It's crazy that they had a B spec car already. It's like they didn't believe in what they were doing. It's like
they
already
just
knew, like,
having a backup.
Well, we're not sure if it's going to work, so we're going to make another car. We think, well, then you know it's not going to work. You're not going to believe in it. And how on earth can you race that car?
Is this the first time that we're really seeing like drama at Mercedes in terms of like Hamilton speaking out and saying that?
Oh
you know,
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
really feel
definitely. Like
no one
listening
talks when
to him.
everything's plain sailing and you've won
Yeah.
like 8
Yeah.
championships in a row.
Yeah.
What would be the point?
Yeah, like I think this is the first time, like even during that 2021 season where Red Bull were challenging, like the Mercedes car was still quick, and this is the first time. Maybe last year it was like, oh, this is just a one-off, but the fact it's continued into this year, like I think Mercedes are very good. They are a very close-knit group. They're not going to start having to go at each other, especially not in public. But there is a bit of a few tense words exchanged. I'd love to see the talks between Toto and Lewis behind closed doors,
Oh,
but
yeah.
like that's something just they're not going to say in
The
public.
last time I remember this type of drama, well, this is different drama because we was winning, but obviously Nico Rosberg versus Hamilton
Yeah.
last
Mhm.
season, where there was a lot of crashing and 1 and 2 poles, and then obviously they're fighting for the championship, and they let them race. That was a different type of drama. This is.
But I bet if you ask Toto, he'd go back to that because at least they're challenging for races.
exactly.
Like
They'll win something.
this, I think this is really frustrating because they just can't make the car better. Like there's one thing having drivers that are fighting each other for wins, but when you're not even anywhere near that, that's definitely.
If I had a
worse
cap,
problem.
I'd just dash it.
throw it at him.
Literally.
What do you expect then from Mercedes this weekend?
I think it's probably more of the same, really. I think they sort of in that gap where they're quicker than, well, I don't know. We didn't really see about Alpine where their true pace is, but I think they are sort of that 5th and 6th mark. I expect Aston Martin to be quick again. Obviously, I expect Red Bull to sort of fly away with it. You expect Ferrari to be a bit better than they were. So I think there's just sort of that not best of the rest, but like that lower bit, not quite the top chasers. I think the podium's not realistic unless, like we said, someone has a massive crash. But yeah, I think it probably is similar to what we saw in Bahrain.
I'm a tiny bit more optimistic for Mercedes this weekend, just because with Charles starting from best 11th, he's got a long way to go. We know that Sainz hasn't got a lot of race pace as it stands. The data suggests that Aston Martin maybe aren't going to be as quick on this track as they were. So I actually think there's a little small window for Mercedes if they qualify well and they can hold off. I think one of them could nip onto the podium. It's a lot to ask, but I think they'll do better than they did in Bahrain. But I'm a man that thinks with his heart, you're a man that thinks with his head, so
He's
probably
wearing
listen to him.
Ferrari jacket.
Well, we can carry on talking with your heart, Joe, because we'll talk about Ferrari.
Yeah.
It was a really bad opening weekend
Yeah.
from a Leclerc point of view. Sainz not so much. He finished 4th. But Fred Vasseur, new principal, didn't quite work out. Also, Ferrari's aerodynamics chief, David Sanchez, also has resigned in that
Gone.
week as well. So they're very quick now to be making their changes. Sainz was easily overtook, though, by Alonso. So again, it's damaging on the car. But do you think they'll be better on the straights this week?
Yeah, they should be. They should be a lot better. They think that they worked on so much over the off-season was making that car quicker in a straight line so that it could compete with the Red Bull. It's not currently, but we'll see. So it should be a track that suits them much better. Mercedes and Ferrari were both complaining about the surface, the asphalt in Bahrain as well, and we know that Jeddah is a much smoother track, so the deg on the tyres should be less. So I think they will be up and about better. I think we can expect to see Charles make his way through, hopefully quite early on, assuming that he starts from maybe 13th, 12th, something like that. Make his way through the pack, and Carlos Sainz needs an unbelievable qualifying session and a really, really strong start at lights out. That's his only chance really of getting on the podium.
Damn, Sainz. I mean, I spoke about Sainz in the last race in terms of, the whole battle with Alonso, and we saw obviously Stroll, if maybe not for the wrist injury, maybe could have been higher up as well because he had a really good finish. There's a lot of pressure for me on Sainz this season in particular, but obviously it comes down to Ferrari's reliability and obviously the sanctions that they're taking in this race. But I feel like Ferrari, they need to be performing, because when was the last time we really seen Ferrari at the front of the grid? It was a long time ago. No, in terms of winning world championships. Long time.
Yeah.
And it's like Ferrari are for me the biggest team on the grid. I think that goes without saying. So you need to get a move on. It feels weird not seeing Ferrari go this long without winning the World Championship constructors. So yeah, I think there's pressure there now, because it's like you're almost there, and now it's like the finer margins, the fine details, the strategy, the drivers. Now it's critical that they get it done.
Well, if you think back to last season, it looked like they had a car that was able to compete, but then more of the strategy, I think, let them down last season than the car. But I know it's only been one race, so it's very hard for us to kind of judge. But already, the electronic power unit last week, I mean, it was a nightmare, Sam.
Yeah, the fact he's gone through 2 already, I think that's one thing drivers don't really accept, is reliability problems. They can understand they're not, we say they're not quite as quick as Red Bull. There was a significant portion of the Bahrain race where Leclerc was ahead of Perez. I think Verstappen's obviously a different level above that, but he showed that he could at least race Perez. And obviously that's a difference between driver talent and the car, but yeah, reliability is just something they don't really want. It was something that hurt them last year. We had a few images of Ferrari cars on fire, which is never a good thing. And then strategy as well was an issue. Obviously, that didn't rear its head in Bahrain, but that's not going to be something that's fixed over one race. So like, you're right, they've got a lot of issues that drivers just don't really accept as problems. They want them all sorted, which, as we've seen with Red Bull, like they've got all those absolutely sorted and fine. So
fine-tuned.
Yeah, well, actually, let's move on to Red Bull. I know none of you really like talking about Red Bull, but it is hard to see anyone beating Red Bull. I mean, Max Verstappen, he barely featured last week because he was off and so far away, you barely saw him until he crossed the finish line, to be fair. Everything is going their way. I mean, the car it seems to be working in all conditions. The tyre degradation is basically near to none. Max Verstappen just on top of his game as usual, and of course you've got Checo, the ever reliable sidekick as well. This track is going to be really good for Checo though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a 1-2 for me. And I don't like saying that because I do want to see a fight. I've come to the point where I fully understand that Max Verstappen is going to win the majority of the races. For me, it's just the talent and then the car. When you put them together, it's unstoppable. It's when I look at Max, I feel like it's not just one of Leclerc or I think you need two in the same team to challenge him. Just strategy wise, maybe pit stops wise, you need two to go at him really to take him down. That's how good he is. He's so quick. And then Checo, like you said, is just so reliable, so good at street circuits. So I can't really look beyond the 1-2 unless there is some sort of crash, red flag, bunching of the cars again, coming on together, something like that, something abnormal to stop Red Bull this weekend.
Yeah, I think you've got to respect what Red Bull have done. They've built an unbelievable car, got a fantastic two driver pairing, particularly in Max Verstappen. He is unbelievably quick. But the car is we didn't even see it at 100%. After about lap 6, they went, oh, you can maintain the car. We're in a comfortable gap, and so he basically just sort of went on like he was going to get his groceries for remaining 50 laps. It was unbelievable. They've done an unbelievable job. You just have to respect what Red Bull are doing. I don't particularly love the team, but I respect what they're doing.
Yeah, you have to. There is, however, a way that this could go that it becomes a little bit boring. If there's no... Obviously, I'm enjoying it. I will. But from a viewer point of view, this could become boring for the viewer, because if Max is basically not featuring, essentially, in any race, and I know that won't happen over the course of the season, but if Red Bull is so far away, I mean, I guess the competitiveness kind of goes from that championship debate, and then you have to start looking at the rivalries between second and third and who's going to get fourth place. And it's a bit of something we haven't really seen that much in F1.
Well, I think we do get periods of like mad dominance. So if we think Ferraris in the early noughts, Schumacher, and then obviously Mercedes in like the 2010s, like it became a competition between the two drivers, as we mentioned, Rosberg.
Even Red Bull with Vettel.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot
But
that.
would you even get that with Red Bull? Could you see Checo?
No, I think that's the problem.
Like, have it.
Obviously, we had the few times at Red Bull when it was Vettel and Mark Webber, they were battling each other. But I don't think Perez has ever really been in that position. He had a few times last year where he sort of tried to get more authority in the team, but he was quickly put back in the corner, really.
Spinning it in Monaco.
Yeah, it feels like he's very easy to kind of like put back in his place. Like there's no
and I think
respite.
If you go back to how he came into Red Bull, like obviously he was facing not being in the sport. Like he was out of Racing Point at the time, but they obviously signed him, and like he'll never admit this, but they would have been like, your job is to like make sure Verstappen wins. Like maybe they won't say it explicitly, but he's sort of put across that way. But in terms of whether the season's a bit boring, I think there is a realistic chance that could happen. Obviously, Verstappen won 15 races last year, so you sort of in that phase where you think, oh, can he beat the record? That's maybe like something to hang your hat on. But I think at least the good thing with F1 is like there's more interesting stuff down 100%. The grid.
You couldn't agree more. I think the battle for the midfield, the fourth, the second, third. I think there's still so much to be excited about with the season. It might be that Max does run away with it and gets wins the drivers by sort of like Monza or something. But I think the rest of the grid, there's so much excitement to be had for the season. So.
Do you think with Perez, there's not an ounce of him to take a bit of inspiration from Nico Rosberg because he was going up against one of the best drivers of all time, and he said that season took a lot out of him. He basically retired after he won that World Championship, right? Because he just knew that he could never replicate that again because it took everything, personally, family-wise, he had to put it all on the line to go up against Lewis Hamilton and fight for every single millisecond. Is there not an ounce of Perez that could maybe try and do that with Max to try and at least fight for potentially your one and only Drivers' World Championship? Because at the end of the day, they're all racers. Since young, they've all fought to win. That's how they got to this point. Not by playing second fiddle, not by vacating poles and allowing Max to win races and defending Max. He's done that many times already. Is there not a little inch of him that goes back to his roots as every driver? I want to win.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Possibly, yeah, but I think just the talent, really. I think that Max Verstappen is just like levels above a lot, perhaps all the drivers on the grid. Like, I think Sergio probably wants that. He's talked a lot about how he wants to challenge for championships. I know his dad last week said he won't retire till he wins the championship. I was thinking he's going to be going to his 50th. He's going to be going for a long time. But like, I think if Perez had a chance of winning the championship, it's not going to be in the same car as Verstappen, because Verstappen's always going to be that little bit better. Like Red Bull are going to favour him, like, even if they say they won't, they definitely will. And like, as soon as Max has any kind of lead in the championship, like, all focus will go on him. Like, I'm sure he wants to be like Rosberg, but I think just Rosberg was just
Does Max not want to fight?
No, he just wants to win.
Wants to win.
Yeah.
It's a distraction if you're fighting your teammate. At the end of the day, it's if I was Checo, of course I'd want to win at the same time. He said, I don't want to go back to Mexico until I win a championship. So, I mean, how old is he now?
30 odd, yeah. Like,
He's not young.
He's not
in his 20s.
He's late, I think late 30s potentially. So, I mean, yeah, like you said, he's going to be driving and until either Max moves, which I can't see ever happening.
Nope.
So I don't. Or if he goes to another team, maybe he'll go to Mercedes. Who knows if Lewis goes?
I think compared to Bottas, like, there's still like a lot of pride in winning the constructors' championship. I think Bottas, if he looks back on his career, he'd say he contributed to, I can't remember how many Mercedes constructors he won, but yeah, I think that's still like something to hang your hat on. But like, something to be proud of is that you've contributed to this team's achievement. Like, yes, you might not ever win the Drivers' Championship, but you can still look back and said, I was involved in like 3 or 4 title-winning campaigns. And like, I think this is probably maybe his second to last seat in F1, so he's just going to enjoy winning races. Because if you think where he came from, he won one race before the Sakir Grand Prix, and that was a massive shock. But now he's in a position where he can challenge at the top. Like, he is at the top of F1 if he's not quite challenging for Verstappen. So yeah, I think there's plenty for him to enjoy. Like, he's not going to be wanting to leave anytime soon.
No, certainly not.
Abby, do you want Max to be challenged, or would you, as a Red Bull fan, do you want him to just run away with the title? What would you rather see as a fan of the team?
I'd probably like the challenge.
Yeah,
I probably would, just because it creates that bit of hunger, and I actually miss kind of seeing Verstappen and Hamilton going at it every single week.
So fun.
It was great to watch. As like a viewer, you love to watch that, even though it didn't always end well for Red Bull. I love to see that competitiveness, because that's what sport's all about, really. So I would like to see it, but I equally really like Checo as well. And I agree with Sam. I think in a matchup, no one beats Verstappen. Yeah. I'm sorry,
I would agree with
don't.
you. My favourite season as a Hamilton fan was actually the season Rosberg took it. Because I was like, oh yeah, come on, let's do this. Because otherwise before it was just like Hamilton's just winning, and I'm coasting now. I'm just like, yeah, we've won this race, we've won that race. As soon as he's gone. Bottas is going to allow him, to kind of play that second fiddle. When Rosberg turned up, I was like, oh, I felt something in my chest. This is.
I would like to see how Verstappen would react if he wasn't completely favoured.
I would also love to see that.
I would like to see how that would go.
I want to see where Max's ego is and what he can do when Red Bull says, you know what, we've given you enough titles now, go fight. Go fight for it now. Because we've given you the car, the reliability's there, but there's another driver here that's been literally looking after you for many years. Now go and take him on. I'd love to see it.
Who knows, that could happen next year. Who knows? Aston Martin, absolutely brilliant first weekend for them. Alonso finishing third. I mean, we all said that they were going to have a pretty good season, didn't we, with him coming into the team and having that car. Stroll, 2 fractured wrists, managed to come 6th in Bahrain, which is pretty unbelievable as well. Red Bull trying to get in their head, saying that they've basically got a third Red Bull on the grid with that car. But I don't think Aston Martin are going to try and really get into a war of words with them on that. Alonso.
Unbelievable. So happy. So happy for him that. And he says he's the dark art of the sport and that he loves to, be the villain and whatnot. And I'm happy for him, because the thing is with Alonso is that we all know he's a legendary great driver, and it's nice to see what a driver like him can do when they're brought back to the kind of front echelons of the grid in a car like that. And yeah, he's just quality. He's always been
The overtakes.
The overtakes were fantastic. I've always rated his defending. I thought he's always been a brilliant defender, but it's good to see him being able to attack as well, because he's usually been in weaker cars in the last few years. He's had to defend his position a lot, but now he can fully attack, and more podiums for him this season. It's going to be fun.
He might have already got overtake of the season in the first race with that one when he gets on the inside of Hamilton. I mean, it's an unbelievable overtake, and then he bullied Sainz as well. I mean, like, stunning driving. Like, honestly, phenomenal. Fair play.
It was. How do you think, Sam, that they'll fare on this track?
I think it'd be another strong performance. I think we mentioned it earlier, but like, it's not a circuit that favours them massively. But I think looking at the other, I mean, aside from Red Bull, looking at the other teams, I think they will be up there. I think Alonso's obviously a very good driver. Like, yeah, I can imagine them challenging for that last podium spot again. Like, I don't think that's unrealistic. And I think these Red Bull comments have been happening since last year. Remember the Spanish Grand Prix when it came out that Aston Martin's car looked a lot like the Red Bulls, but I think that's just something that a lot of teams have adopted this year.
It's a compliment.
Yeah, like, obviously, if like you're gonna have this car that's so dominant, like the other teams are gonna be like, okay, we'll maybe take some of the best parts of that. So I don't think it's unfair, but I think there's a lot of good work that Aston Martin are doing as well on their own. It's not just, I think it's harsh to say it's a complete copy of the Red Bull car, because obviously there's some differences and some similarities. But yeah, I think in going back to Saudi Arabia, like definitely, I think another strong weekend for both of them.
Okay, I was really happy for Haas. I mean, I know they missed out on the points, but it was a much better qualifying session for them. You know, they started 10th on the grid, wasn't it, Hülkenberg? Magnussen ended up 13th. That's not particularly bad for a Haas team.
Yeah, no, from where they've come from. I mean, I remember when they was back of the grid, Mazepin causing loads of problems, and
they've always got people that cause them loads of problems.
And so I think they've got a good driver lineup. There's a lot of experience there. Both drivers, I think, well, Magnussen's definitely matured and become a lot more reliable, and then you've got Hülkenberg, who's vastly experienced, very calm figure, been there, done it. You know, you know what you're getting. So I think they've got a good combination there, and I think they could put some consistency together. That Ferrari engine, though, we're watching very closely.
Yeah,
no implosions.
Time will tell whether that holds up in the Haas or not. Yeah, I think they'll actually be a little bit disappointed that they didn't score any points. I know their ambition is a lot higher this season than it has been in other seasons. They want to finish firmly in that midfield, be it maybe even looking at a 5th or 6th is what they want to do. So I think they'll be disappointed they didn't score any points, and moving forward they're going to want to get at least one car in the points every race. Has to be their ambition.
Williams, though, they did score a point. Huge. I mean, that is actually huge from
a
Williams standpoint. 1 point, that is huge. A really good race by Albon, and I thought Sargent, as we mentioned at the start of the show, actually also had a really good rookie race. What can they do this season? You mentioned you didn't think they'd be at the bottom of the pack.
No, I'm proven right so far. If the season ends today, I think that it was a good race for them. Like their strategy was very good compared to a lot of the teams around them. I think sort of that P10 is probably the best they can expect. I mean, we've also got to take into account that obviously Charles Leclerc retired, so they probably would have been P11th. I think late on in the race, like Albon was, I don't know, like 8th around there, but he got quickly overtaken. But yeah, I think that definitely fighting for that last point paying spot is definitely up for them. But if we also remember these teams at the bottom, like 1 point to them is like worth like 20 to the teams at the front. Like if you get a point, you could go the next 5 or 6 races without getting it, and your competitors as well could go. So like Williams currently ahead of McLaren, ahead of AlphaTauri, ahead of Haas. So like they've had a great start. It's whether they can build on that and get the occasional point. They're not going to be expecting to finish in the points every race. Like that's just not realistic. There's going to be some tracks that are better for them and some that are worse. But yeah, I think Albon's a very good driver, and I think Sargent perhaps surprised a lot of people with his performance early on. Like, I think
very much so.
He was sort of predicted to be the worst rookie,
almost,
sort of around that mark, and he proved himself able to battle that sort of lower half of the grid. So
he's definitely the rookie with like the least hype around him. I remember when he was doing the preview and was like, Sargent, not sure about that. But I think Williams, the cost cap we was talking about as well, has come in. I think it's going to be interesting to see how many years it takes them to kind of get back to the Williams I knew, which was Bottas and Massa and fighting, near the front. But
now that the cost caps come in, maybe this will allow them to eventually be more. They need to catch up a little
Historic team, big team.
Yes. Right, before we wrap up, Alfa Romeo for you again. No one ever talks about Alfa Romeo.
Talk about Alfa Romeo. Really bad.
Joe Guan Yu again, not finishing in the points. Bottas did. same. I mean, there's really much to say.
I feel so sorry for them.
There's really not
I
much
really
to say.
do feel so sorry for Alfa Romeo.
And
They desperately
Alfa Romeo
need that
fans.
rebrand.
They need Audi to come and
Yeah,
fix it.
badly.
They really do.
Just don't have the clout.
Yeah. I just say every week, I just love the car. I just love looking at the car. It's such a nice, pretty car. I don't care how it performs as long as I see
Bring
it.
me Audi,
We don't
man.
need to talk about them. We just like the car. Alpine though, disappointing. Gasly, Ocon, Gasly in the points. Ocon, not so good.
Horror show.
Gasly,
Horror show
yeah.
from Ocon.
Yeah.
God.
Gasly had a great day.
How many penalties did Ocon
3,
actually have?
20, 20 seconds of penalties. I mean, that was
You know that
disgusting.
meme where it's like another one? That was not
Another
sitting there.
one.
Another
Honestly,
one.
I can't. Yeah, that
He
meme.
was the Bruno Fernandes of Bahrain. That's what I'm going to call him. The Bruno Fernandes of Bahrain. So many penalties. But Gasly, your favourite guy.
Yeah, very well, yeah.
Gasly had a great race. Loads of overtakes, loads of points on the fantasy. So, no, I'm excited by Alpine. I mean, I think I don't really know where they're going to finish because I feel like it's too early to judge with them because they were really quick last year. And then obviously Aston Martin have come along and maybe overtaken them for now. But I don't know. I like
I think they'll
Alpine.
do a good job this weekend. I think they'll get both drivers in the points this
definitely,
weekend.
hopefully.
And could be a good place for them to kick on with Alpine.
They're quite a cool team, Alpine. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's very French.
Very
It
French.
couldn't be more French.
Couldn't be. It
more
could not
French.
literally
It
be
is the
more
epitome.
French than it actually is.
It's as French as like a French baguette.
Yeah.
It's so French. Okay, right, before we wrap, guys, we are playing our very own F1 fantasy. We've been picking our team names. We've been doing our little squads. Do we call them a squad? Grid?
Yeah.
Grid,
Squad. Yeah, I
grid.
think,
So I want to know who you've got, and I want all of your predictions as well for this weekend's race.
Okay, so I called mine Mad Mercedes because I couldn't think of a name.
You actually, no one had that name?
No, shockingly
good.
not. I gave her a great name and then
Yeah,
it
but
was,
everyone-
it was taken. Red Bull
Tried
gives
it.
you wins. That's far too
It
good.
was
So,
good, but I tried it with exclamation
late to
marks,
be
didn't work. Numbers didn't
Dot,
work,
dot,
so we moved.
I've gone with Verstappen, of course. I feel like value for money is there. I think value for money is there with Perez as well. I was seeing Perez and Hamilton and Leclerc. Perez was the cheapest of all of them, and he's clearly going to have a great car this year. And then constructors, I decided to leave Red Bull because they're so expensive and double up with an Aston Martin and a Ferrari, I think it was. Okay. But yeah, I don't know if that was a good decision.
You haven't got Red Bull constructor.
I wanted to, but they're so expensive.
Oh,
And then
Matisse.
it leaves me.
Oh,
I haven't
Matisse.
fully decided. I'm probably
To be
going to go.
fair,
Probably going to go back on.
I haven't gone Red Bull Constructor. I've gone Red Bull Championship.
Double driving.
Yeah,
To
sorry,
both
double driver. Yeah, and
I've done the driver.
Yeah.
Not the
Interesting.
I don't know. I feel like I'm going to regret that massively. Yeah.
I've gone the opposite route. Yeah.
Yes, you will.
Yes, you are. I've gone the opposite route, just triple Red Bull. So I've got both drivers and the constructors. Like I think they're just the best. Like in terms of perhaps not that often, not more picked choices. Like I have gone for Gasly. He did really well last week. I think he's going to do well again this week. And then I think Joe's. I think a lot of people have Joe because he's in a good car and he's sort of a lower price bracket if you're needing to save pennies to get triple Red Bull like I do.
Yeah. So, when you play FPL, Fantasy Premier League, they say think with your head, not your heart. And that's exactly what I'm not doing with Formula One. I've got Carlos Sainz in there. I've currently got Ferrari as my constructor, but I'm going to make you get 2 free changes a week. So I'm going to make my changes. I'm going to bring Red Bull in as the constructor. Can't not do it. And I'm going to get rid of Ocon because he's a little bit more expensive and bring in, I think, probably Sonoda. I think he had a good race, so he might be able to do a little job there. But I think basically, if you haven't got at least double Red Bull, you're in for an absolute spanking this week.
Yeah. I think I'm going to have to change mine.
Yeah.
I had Red Bull, but I think I need to put Checo in as well. I feel like I'm doing him a disservice if I'm not putting him in.
And the thing is, Matisse was saying earlier, he's only 1 million more than Carlos Sainz.
Yeah,
and you've
Sainz
got to
sold
imagine
out.
he's worth more than 1 million than him.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put him in though because I'm standing by my boy Carlos
Fair
Sainz.
enough.
I slag him
I
off on
respect it.
every video we do. I go, Carlos has got to be quicker, and I still put him in my fantasy.
I love Sainz, but he's got to leave. Right, I want your race winners for this week. Why don't you give me your top 3?
I'm going to go Verstappen for the win, Perez second, and Lewis in third. If it's a good track for Mercedes, we'll pray.
I'm going to Verstappen top, Perez second, and Leclerc third.
Ooh.
Wow.
Wow. I believe. Not as much as Joe, but...
See, I don't think... I think Leclerc will do a job, but I think because Sainz will be further ahead, They're very firm on saying, "Oh, we don't have a preferred driver partnership, so they won't let him pass."
They say that, but I think if Leclerc's in his
I
race,
do think Leclerc's
we'll see.
Whether or not Sainz does let.
No, I think Sainz has a lot to prove, so I'm going to go a Red Bull 1-2, Max from pole, and I think Carlos Sainz will bring it home third place.
I was going to actually copy you. I think Sainz will get third.
Should we make a bet?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Mine is more hope than expectation.
Well, who knows? Maybe George Russell.
Maybe.
Who knows? Don't take your eye off him.
Oh.
Well, that is everything for this week's preview. Thank you, Matisse. Thank you, Sam from Planet F1. Thank you, Joe. And of course, we'll be back this weekend for qualifying on Saturday with myself. You're doing the race on Sunday
indeed.
as well.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Oh, you're getting all the good ones at the minute, aren't you? All the good ones. Until we're both here for Australia in a few weeks' time. Nice and early. Don't forget, please like and subscribe to On Track GP. Make sure you keep it locked in with us for all your F1 content. And we will see you very soon.
Oh, God, McLaren!
He's gone.
He's been in the pit 40 seconds!
Whoa.
Front wing! Careful with the front wing! God! Matisse, it's happening, mate. I'm putting on my lucky new Ferrari hat. Oh, no.
Oh, Sainz.
Leclerc.
It's Leclerc. Drama.
Take that out.